We are going to begin the fourth lecture in our series on Marx's essay titled Why Abortion is Immoral. In this lecture, I'm going to focus primarily on the argument and how Marcus goes about giving support for the different premises. And since there's a lot of information in this particular lecture, I'm going to just narrate the slides for you. So let's get right into the argument itself. All right, so I'm calling it the basic argument. The basic way of thinking about the argument is beginning with, as we saw before, a premise that says killing me is wrong, killing you is wrong, but killing me, although it changes my biological state, this is not what makes killing me wrong. Remember, this is an abductive argument, so we're trying to figure out what makes killing me or you wrong. We'll begin there. So the second premise, it says that the loss of my biological life affects me, depriving me all of those activities, projects, experiences, and enjoyments which I would have otherwise have constituted my future personal life. Remember from the previous video, this is sort of the main thing that we saw Don Marcus was trying to show, right? He said that this was one of the greatest losses that anyone could possibly experience, namely the loss of all of the things we find valuable, all of the activities, the projects, experiences, and so forth. And so my biological life being altered such that my biology do what it does, well, that affects me, but affects me insofar as I'm no longer able to pursue these projects and experiences, employments, and so forth. Three says these experiences and so forth are intrinsically valuable or they're instrumentally valuable in order to arrive or achieve something else that is intrinsically valuable. So the basic idea here is maybe the activities or projects and so forth that I pursue in my life, either they're valuable in and of themselves, or maybe they're valuable because they instrumentally are able to help me achieve something else that I think is intrinsically valuable. So maybe reading a whole bunch of philosophy is intrinsically valuable in itself, or you might think that reading a whole bunch of philosophy is instrumentally valuable in order to achieve something else, like a degree in philosophy, which might be intrinsically valuable. So those are the two ways in which something might be valuable, either this intrinsically way or instrumentally way. And so premise four says that parts of my future that are not valuable to me now may become valuable to me as I grow older, right? So maybe when let's say I was 20 years old and it was not valuable for me to read any philosophy. But later on, as I grew older and I decided I wanted to pursue a degree in philosophy, then reading a bunch of philosophy texts did become valuable to me. So even though something that may not be valuable to me now, it may be valuable to me as I get older and my desires and so forth shift. But when I'm killed, I'm actually deprived of both the things that I now currently value and those things that I would have come to value in the future. So if somebody killed me when I was 20 years old, they would have deprived me of the thing I would have valued when I was in my 30s, namely doing philosophy, let's say. Therefore, according to the way Marcus is arguing, killing me deprives me of not just some things that are valuable, but all things that are valuable. Certainly those things in the future, right? All of the value of my future. All right. So that's the way the basic argument goes. And the explanation of the wrongness of killing then is when I'm killed, I am deprived of all the value of my future, right? We saw that. And this is supposed to mean present and future. So once we've established that, then inflicting this loss on me is ultimately what makes killing me wrong. This being the case, it would seem that what makes killing any adult human being prima facie seriously wrong is the loss of his or her future. That's essential, right? It's not just you or me, but it's any human being that has a valuable future life. Killing them would be wrong insofar as it deprives them of that valuable future life. So in order to get from the second conclusion to the third conclusion, what Marcus is doing is he's generalizing from individuals to all human beings, any sort of entity that has a valuable future life. Well, let's evaluate this argument. Does the argument attempt to derive an ought from an is? This is something that Marcus considers, where an ought is some moral obligation that you would have as a moral agent, and an is supposed to be just like some factual matter, some sort of descriptive way of thinking about the world, right? So you might think that it would be problematic to try to show that you have a prescriptive or obligation that you ought to do being derived from some descriptive way the world is. If you think that's a good objection, then Marcus says this argument is not vulnerable to that objection. Why not? He says it's because it's a natural explanation of the wrongness of killing in general. It is just describing some fact of the world. Killing is wrong for X and Y and Z reasons. So, the analysis of the wrongness of killing, Marcus says, the point of the analysis is to establish which natural property ultimately explains the fact that wrongness is killing. The question then arises, what exactly will it take for this natural property to explain the wrongness of killing? First, Marcus says the explanation fits our intuitions. It better be the case that whatever the explanation is, it's not going to be wildly different from what we generally take it to be. It's got to fit our intuitions in the right way. And second, well, there's no other natural property that does a better job, right? If there was some other natural property that would be a better explanation, then we should go with that one. Furthermore, what makes killing wrong will be some natural property or effect on the victim itself. Remember, that was a key thing we discussed before. It's a direct harm to the victim, to the one who's killed. And there's going to be further intuitive support, according to Marcus, in the following way. Take the proposition that says killing X is wrong because doing so deprives X of a valuable future like ours. Well, we think that that is true, but let's try to figure out why. Two considerations that are supposed to support the truth of this proposition. Well, one says the theory explains why we intuitively think that killing is one of the worst things, worst crimes that one can perform. So it seems to satisfy the first criterion. So it fits our intuitions. We definitely think that killing, intuitively speaking, is just seriously wrong. And the second consideration, well, the theory explains why people who know that they are going to die tend to fear death, right? They tend to think that dying is something bad for them. I think the example that Marcus uses is somebody who finds out that they are HIV positive or somebody who has AIDS. And of course, this is probably not as relevant today as it was when he was writing this. You might think that they fear the death that they realize are coming before them. It will be in their future. And why do they fear it? Because it's going to deprive them of a future life of value. If you want a better example, surely if you are diagnosed with a terminal illness at the age of 20, you're being deprived of many years of life that would be otherwise valuable. And so if you fear the death that awaits you, then that seems like an intuitive reason why you would fear it, because you're going to be deprived of things that you otherwise would have. So Marcus thinks that any adequate theory of the wrongness of killing are going to have to account for these two main considerations, and that his view certainly does a very good job of accounting for these. He also thinks that there are very important implications for his theory. On the one hand, it seems to be incompatible with the view that it's only wrong to kill humans. This was the notion of speciesism that we discussed previously. The speciesism being that somehow we're going to place favor on human beings or on our species over other animals or non-human animals. And so he thinks that his does not do this. It's incompatible with claim that it's only wrong to kill humans. And it also tells us that non-human animals that are sufficiently like us, insofar as they have a valuable future life in the same sort of way that we do, that would be morally wrong to kill them. So take, for example, apes or dolphins, or maybe even some aliens or Martians. If it's the case that these non-human animals have a valuable future life in the same way that we do, then it would be just as wrong, seriously wrong to kill them as it would be you or me. You might wonder, though, about this. What about pigs? I grew up in Kansas City and I love Kansas City barbecue. And pigs are really, really intelligent animals that, have valuable future lives, presumably. Am I automatically going to think that it's just as wrong to kill a pig as it is to kill a human? It's not super clear. But according to Marcus, he thinks that this sort of problematic way of thinking about it is not going to count against his view at all. So you might just have to say, well, yeah, we're doing something morally wrong when we're eating Kansas City barbecue. So even if it's the case that you feel somewhat troubled by this particular implication, maybe it's because you recognize that a pig might have a valuable future in the same way that a dolphin or an ape, or maybe you or myself. Nonetheless, Marcus thinks that that's not going to be a problem for his view. It should not count against his theory. From now, let's go ahead and move on. Marcus says that the theory does not entail, as the sanctity of life theory does, that active euthanasia is seriously morally wrong. Okay, so this is the way Marcus puts it. Persons who are severely and incurably ill, who have a future of pain and despair, and who wish to die will not have suffered a loss if they are killed. It is, strictly speaking, the value of a human's future which makes killing in this theory wrong. Right? So, in other words, an implication of his view is that, at least in some cases, active euthanasia will be permissible. Another important implication says that the theory straightforwardly entails that it is prima facie seriously wrong to kill children and infants. So, if you've got a view of personhood that makes it morally permissible to kill children or infants because maybe they're not persons on your view, then that would be a problem for your view. And so these sort of accounts of the wrongness of killing, when applied to children and infants, must add some sort of ad hoc maneuver to avoid this kind of implausible implication, that infanticide is not morally impermissible. And so Marcus thinks that that's not going to apply to his view. He says, it seems that this value of a future like ours theory of the wrongness of killing shares strengths of both the sanctity of life and the personhood accounts while avoiding the weaknesses of both of them. So that would be an important implication insofar as it gives him an advantage over other competing theories. What about for the ethics of abortion? What implications does it have here? He says the future of a standard fetus includes a set of experiences, projects, activities, and such, which are identical with the futures of adult human beings and are identical with the futures of young children. Okay? And since the reason that is sufficient to explain why it's wrong to kill human beings after the time of birth is a reason that also applies to fetuses, it follows that abortion is prima facie seriously morally wrong. And so far as a fetus is the sort of thing that has a valuable future life, just as we do, then it would be just as wrong to kill them as it would be to kill you or me. Again, this is explained because such things as fetuses would have a valuable future life. So what about some potential objections? Well, we're going to have to return to that point in another video. There is this notion, however, of potential persons and possible people. And that's one way that we might initially try to object, right? Someone might try to argue that while a fetus is not a person, it is a potential person. And since it's morally wrong to kill a person, then it would be morally wrong to kill a potential person too. This is a point that Marcus considers, and he thinks that this particular inference is invalid. You can't move from the wrongness of killing persons to the wrongness of killing potential persons. Additionally, Marcus claims that his argument avoids this mistake, which would be an advantage for it. However, in attempting to show that the inference is invalid, what he appears to be doing is shifting talk from potential persons to actual persons. What he actually says here is that the category that is morally central to the analysis is the category of having a valuable future like ours. It's not the category of personhood. He's trying to move from this notion of potential personhood or personhood in general to the notion of having a valuable future like ours. Notice that a potential person, or maybe even a possible person, does not have an actual future yet. It only has a potential future or a possible future. And so it's actually having a valuable future like ours that's going to be crucial, not personhood. So it does appear that there's a kind of shift going on here. So Marcus claims that his argument is structurally similar to an argument for the wrongness of causing pain. Notice that this would involve actual pain, not potential pain, right? So why would it be wrong to maybe slap somebody or hit somebody? It would be the actual pain that's inflicted that would make it wrong. If I just pretended to cause pain but didn't actually cause it, then if it's wrong, it's not wrong because it actually caused pain. So this is where we can see Marcus's view shifting from possible to actual occurrences of having a valuable future. Likewise, Marx's attempt to avoid the objection is based upon potential persons, potential actual persons more specifically. In effect, one might think that what Marcus has actually done is provided not a way to avoid the problem of potential persons, but an appeal to potential persons with a valuable future like ours. Why would an argument based on potential persons be problematic? Well, it seems to imply that something like contraception will be morally wrong. That's because contraception would deprive the potential person or the possible person from a valuable future like ours. Of course, there might be some views, perhaps like the Roman Catholic Church or some forms of Protestantism, that would actually agree with this, that they would think maybe this is a virtue rather than a vice of the theory. But you might also think that the view implies that abstinence would be morally wrong. Why would abstinence be morally wrong? Well, in the case of abstinence, you are depriving a possible or potential person of a valuable future. And we might even think that the notion of a potential person is kind of problematic in the first place. What exactly do we mean? And what's the notion of a possible person? How is that different from potential persons or an actual valuable future, right? Do possible people have an actual or a possible valuable future? How many possible people are there? How many potential persons are there? What Marcus does is he tries to avoid these sort of issues by shifting things to actual futures of value. So now let's look at the argument again a little bit closer. And this argument is actually it's constructed or reconstructed from a text called Just the Arguments by Leslie Burkholder. And so the way that the argument is reconstructed here is as follows. First premise says that killing this particular adult human being or child would be seriously morally wrong. That seems to be the sort of thing that we should all intuitively accept. What makes it morally wrong is that it causes the loss of all this individual's future experiences, activities, projects, and enjoyments, and that this loss is one of the greatest losses that can be suffered. But then we can get a conclusion. The first conclusion just says killing this particular adult human being or child would be seriously morally wrong. And what makes it wrong is that it causes the loss of all of this individual's future experiences, activities, projects, and so on. This is one of the greatest losses. And notice that the first conclusion is simply just a conjunction of the first two premises. First two premises are true, then we can get the first conclusion simply by conjoining the two premises together. Now we're able to present a third premise. It says, if killing this particular adult human being or child would be seriously wrong, and what makes it so wrong is that it causes the loss of all this individual's future experiences, activities, enjoyment, and that this is one of the greatest losses that can be suffered, then anything that causes to any individual the loss of all future experiences, activities, projects, and enjoyments is seriously wrong, right? This is the generalization from the individual to any sort of entity that has these features, these properties. So then we have the second conclusion that is just the consequent of the conditional in premise three. Anything that causes to any individual the loss of all future experiences, activities, projects, and enjoyments is seriously morally wrong. This is based upon a modus ponens, where we use the first conclusion and plug that into the antecedent of premise three, and we're able to derive the consequent from premise three, which is now C2, the second conclusion. Premise four, all aborting of any healthy fetuses would cause the loss to that individual of all its future experiences, activities, projects, and enjoyments. And this is an assumption. It looks like he believes that fetuses definitely are the sort of things that have a valuable future. So then we're able to derive a third conclusion, because this is just a particular instantiation of the second conclusion. If A causes to individual F the loss of all future experiences, activities, projects, and enjoyments, then A is seriously morally wrong. It's just the instantiation from the generalization we had in the second conclusion. So now a fourth conclusion, if A is an abortion of a healthy fetus F, then A causes to individual F the loss of all future experiences, activities, projects, and enjoyments. That's the particular instantiation of that fourth premise. Conclusion 5 is a hypothetical syllogism from conclusion 3 and conclusion 4, right? It just simply says, if A is an abortion of a healthy fetus F, then A is seriously wrong. It looks like that follows. And so this is the basic argument that Marcus has given us. It looks like it's a valid argument. If we're going to try to show that it's not a good argument, if it's one that we might want to reject, then we're going to have to try to show either that we have some reason to think it doesn't work, or we're going to have to try to show which premise we need to reject as false. And then we get our final conclusion here saying all aborting of any healthy fetuses is seriously morally wrong.